very much. We'll now hear from Professor Peter Hallwood, who's philosophy professor at Kingston University and was Alfie's tutor, Alfie Meadows' tutor.
So I'll say some things about Alfie specifically. First of all, he's a remarkably good student. He was a first-year BA student last year, and already at that time he was sitting in on master's level classes that I was giving. He's passionately devoted to his studies. He's thoroughly committed to this cause of protecting what's left of public education in this country. He's, as Claire said, he's a very gentle, he's the last person you would expect to be looking for a fight, so he's someone who would go on a demonstration. He's brave. He would stand his ground if the police pushed him back, but I cannot believe that he would have initiated any kind of violence. So we have to have a full inquiry into any the circumstances of this, why he was hit, why he was attacked, and we need all the available evidence for what happened. I saw him a couple of times before the incident, then again after he'd been hit. So we had tried, like many others, to try and leave the demonstration about sometime around 5, maybe just before 5. There was a rumor going out, at least, that you could get out, and I believe some people did. I think Nina managed to leave around then by the Parliament Street exit of the Kettle. And it was possible. We failed initially, my partner and I, but we managed to get out down the left-hand side of Parliament Street, down Whitehall a bit, and there was a new line of police with horses that pushed people back quite aggressively, advancing down the street, pushing everybody back with their shields into the horses, and that was when I feel that the tenor of the demonstration changed a little bit. Before that, I didn't see any violence conducted against police at all, but by the time people had been pushed back into Parliament Square, particularly along that entrance from Whitehall, there were some scuffles in with police, and I don't know, maybe that's where Alfie was. We have to find out about that. We tried to go out another exit, and when that failed, by now at every exit there were maybe a dozen or rows or so of people. Coming back, I ran into Alfie. Just literally, he was walking along dazed in the middle of Parliament Square with a large bump on the side of his head. There was some blood in his hair, matted hair, but it wasn't like a blood streaming down his head. It wasn't a cut. It was clearly an impact injury. He said, "I've been hit by the police." And he said, "I don't feel very good." And we immediately took him, my partner and I, by the arm and went back to the entrance by George Street to try and get him out of the Kettle. It took a few minutes to get through the crowd to the police line, and the police then took another minute or so before they eventually looked him over and said, "Okay, we will take him out." We were not allowed to accompany him. We said we need to make sure he gets medical attention. They refused to let us go with him. And that was the last we saw of him. They literally absorbed him into the police line, which was about 3 people deep, and put their shields around him to make sure that nobody could follow him. And at that point, in fact, after the fact now I regret we didn't insist, and we should have, absolutely insisted on going with him. What happened then, I know from a student of mine called Will Potter, who saw him when he came out of the police Kettle. Will Potter, who's a PhD student at Kingston, saw Alfie when he came through the second line of police, said that he had a few words with a police officer, and then was left to walk on George Street. And Will asked him, "Are you all right? And what's happening?" And Alfie said, "Don't worry." He was basically disoriented, but basically said, "I don't want you to be with me," and just wandered off on his own. At which point he called his mother, and thank God his mother who's a lecturer at Roehampton, was in the demonstration. Thankfully, heard that message, was able to find him, get out of the Kettle herself, and find him in the streets south of Victoria, and they were able to find an ambulance together. At which point, they went as fast as possible to the hospital at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, I think it was. And on arrival, he began throwing up, and it was clear that he was in an extremely serious condition. If she hadn't been able to find him, if they hadn't been able to find an ambulance, it's very likely, from what I was told, that he could have easily passed out and probably died in the streets.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Nina Power, who's a senior lecturer at Roehampton University.
Well, I guess shortly before the violence that happened to Alfie, I was standing with his mother, who's a colleague of mine, with Alfie and with Peter Hallwood, and in fact we were talking about safety on protests, and we're talking about staying in touch with people on the protests, and his mother was talking about how worried she gets about Alfie, and it was good that we were all together. At which point, like many other people, we were trying to work out a way out of the Kettle. Lots of the exits seemed blocked. People were asking the police to let them out. The police were refusing to do so. I went one way, Alfie went another way, and obviously Peter Holwood caught up with Alfie later. Only a few of us were let out at this point. It was a sort of narrow route just off Parliament Street, and they were letting a few people out. But before that, we tried to walk down Parliament Street, and a line of riot police with a line of police horses behind kept pushing everybody back, quite some speed in fact. So people were forced to run back for fear of being charged by the horses and also by the riot police. So it was, the atmosphere turned very dark, I would say at this point, not from the side of the students but from the side of the protesters, but from the side of the police, who seemed very determined that they were going to corral and kettle as many people as they could in quite a violent and fast-moving way, and they weren't above using the horses to do this. So, and as a whole, I would say, you know, the police tactics are obviously need to be looked at very closely. There seem to be quite a lot of different decisions being made by different officers, and we need to find who did this to Alfie. I don't know who did it. You know, as I say, we lost touch with him maybe 15-20 minutes before. Obviously his mother found him. I've been speaking to her this morning. She was obviously incredibly worried. She's been up all night. It's a very, very close situation. Alfie was very, very seriously hurt. Obviously emergency 3-hour operation, very serious sort of injury to his brain. Luckily he's been talking this morning, and you know, his mother's been kind of telling us that he's okay. But obviously without this kind of immediate medical help, he could have been much more serious.
So I'm going to take some questions now.
Mike Sargent, BBC News. It was obviously a very confusing situation on the ground, and very hard to be absolutely clear about what was going on at any point. Are there any witnesses that you're aware of who actually saw the incident when Alfie was struck?
I don't know of any, no. There must have been some, but I don't know.
We're obviously calling for the recordings of the demonstration to be made public and released certainly to the family as soon as possible. I think the police will certainly have a record of what's happened, and I see no reason why they can't expedite giving that very quickly to the family.
But he himself said that he'd been hit by...
He told me that, yes, he'd been hit by the police. He didn't mention a truncheon to me specifically, but I can't see what else it would have been. That seems like the most likely thing. A shield would have cut him more. I mean, whatever I hope that witnesses will be found and we'll get a full account of this. I can't imagine any circumstance, though, in which a policeman that would authorize a policeman to hit a student or any person across the head in such a way. I mean, it isn't. We've reached a point which is genuinely scandalous. I think it's yeah.
The questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Or do you want to make another statement, Claire? Paul?
I mean, what are you calling for the Metropolitan Police to do? Because in previous occasions where public order has broken down and there have been serious injuries to people, it's been some time before the accounts has come out, and you yourselves haven't got any definitive statement of what has happened. What is it that you want the police to do right now?
Well, we saw with Ian Tomlinson how long it took for anything to come out, and for how long an inquiry took. We want the police to cooperate immediately, release any information they have immediately, release the CCTV, release the recordings that we know they make. Obviously, in the longer term, we want a public inquiry about policing. I think we need to have a debate in this country about policing. We want to, specifically, we want the names of the officer, the unit the officer came from, and we want the police to cooperate with the family. It's not acceptable that these incidents can happen and doors are closed, police stay silent until official wheels turn months and months later. We want to know now what happened. We want the CCTV, we want the recordings now, and we want to know the officer, we want to know the unit, and we want to know what their operational orders were as well.